The Fair of Ages had always been a celebration of human history, a place where people could experience the grandeur of medieval tournaments, the excitement of Renaissance festivals, and the charm of ancient marketplaces all in one sprawling venue. But 5 years ago, when the first interstellar visitors made contact with Earth, the fair evolved into something more, a cultural exchange platform that spanned not just centuries, but light years. Dallas Thornton wiped sweat from his brow as he hammered the last wooden stake into the ground, securing the banner that read Interstellar Smackdown in bold, flame-styled letters. The midday sun beat down on the fairgrounds, turning the medieval-themed arena into a sweltering cauldron of anticipation. Around him, workers hustled to prepare the wooden bleachers and the sand-covered ring, where, in just a few hours, history would be made. "You really think this is going to work?" Mai Tanaka asked, handing Dallas a water bottle. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and skepticism gleamed in her eyes. As the fair's cultural liaison, she had spent months coordinating with the alien delegations, ensuring that every aspect of their participation would be respectful and enlightening for all involved. Dallas gulped down half the bottle before answering. "Trust me, May. People love a good show, and our visitors are eager to understand human entertainment. What better way than through the universal language of competitive showmanship?" May frowned, unconvinced. "Wrestling isn't exactly a pinnacle of human cultural achievement." "Maybe not," Dallas admitted with a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "But it's honest. It's primal. And it's a hell of a lot more fun than another diplomatic dinner." Before May could argue further, a commotion at the entrance to the arena caught their attention. A group of beings moved through the growing crowd, their varied physiologies drawing stares and whispers. The visitors had arrived. 3 distinct species composed the alien delegation. The krill, tall and lanky with iridescent exoskeletons that caught the light like prisms, moved with graceful, almost balletic steps. Their 4 arms ended in delicate digits capable of mathematical calculations so complex they could predict weather patterns by observing the movement of a single leaf. Their spokesman, simply called Krill, as was their custom, walked at the front, head tilted in curious observation. Behind them came the puffs, rotund beings covered in a soft, downy fur that shifted colors with their emotions. Currently, a mix of excited orange and curious purple. They bounced more than walked, their natural buoyancy making Earth's gravity something of a playground. Their representative, named Puff, a simplification for human pronunciation, rolled forward with eager eyes that seemed to absorb everything at once. The Rons, the last group, were perhaps the most humanoid in appearance, though their skin had a distinct metallic sheen, and their proportions were slightly exaggerated, taller, broader, with more defined musculature. Ron, their designated speaker, strode with confidence, shoulders back and chin raised. The Rons were known as warriors and philosophers, a civilization that had mastered both the art of combat and the science of peace. May stepped forward to greet them, bowing slightly in a gesture that had become standard protocol across species. "Welcome to the Fair of Ages. We're honored by your presence." Krill's multifaceted eyes caught the sunlight as he returned the bow. "The honor is ours. We have studied your fairs with great interest. Such gatherings seem to be universal constants across intelligent species." "Yes," Puff chimed in, his voice a melodic burble. "Though the concept of reenacting historical periods is fascinatingly human. We prefer to look forward, not backward." "Yet there is wisdom in remembering where one comes from," Ron added, his deep voice resonating with a slight metallic undertone. "We are curious about this. Smackdown your messages mentioned." Dallas stepped forward, extending a hand in greeting. "That's where I come in. Dallas Thornton, Entertainment Coordinator. We've prepared something special for today. a friendly competition that showcases one of humanity's oldest forms of athletic entertainment. The aliens exchanged glances, a universal gesture of interest mixed with apprehension that transcended species. "What sort of competition?" Ron asked, a glimmer of what might have been excitement crossing his metallic features. Before Dallas could answer, a booming voice called out from behind them, "The kind that separates the warriors from the pretenders!" All heads turned to see a man striding toward them, tall and broad-shouldered, with a showman's smile and wrestler's swagger. He wore what appeared to be a hybrid of medieval costume and wrestling attire, leather pants, an open vest revealing a chiseled torso, and armored bracers that gleamed in the sunlight. "Jameson Blackwell," he announced, sweeping into a theatrical bow. "Former champion, current impresario, and the man who's about to make interstellar history." May's expression tightened. "We didn't discuss your involvement, Jameson." "Oh, come now. May, did you really think a cultural exchange of this magnitude could happen without me?" Jameson's smile never wavered as he turned to address the visitors directly. "Gentle beings, I propose a spectacle like none other, a series of wrestling matches between your representatives and ours, using only the technology and techniques of Earth's ancient past." The aliens' reactions varied. Krill's exoskeleton shimmered with what appeared to be skepticism. Puff expanded slightly, his fur shifting to a curious yellow. Ron, however, stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "You suggest combat, without modern safeguards?" "Friendly combat," Jameson corrected. "A demonstration of skill and strength, not a battle. Earth rules, Earth technology, or lack thereof. No modern enhancements, no advanced weapons, just body against body, wit against wit, in the grand tradition of the wrestling arts." Dallas shot May a worried glance. This wasn't part of the plan, but he couldn't deny the electric atmosphere that had suddenly enveloped the arena. The crowd of fairgoers, initially just passing by, had begun to gather more densely around them, drawn by Jameson's theatrical pronouncement. "It would ensure a level playing field," Dallas found himself saying. "No offense, but your species have certain advantages that might make other competitions unfair." "And you believe your primitive combat methods would negate these advantages?" Krill asked, his voice a melodic cascade of tones. Jameson's smile widened. "I believe they would reveal the true nature of strength. Not technological prowess, not evolutionary quirks, but heart, determination, and the will to prevail." A murmur ran through the crowd. The aliens conferred among themselves, their body language and expressions communicating across species barriers in ways that words sometimes couldn't. Finally, Ron stepped forward. "We accept this challenge. It will be educational." "Excellent!" Jameson clapped his hands together. "We'll need 3 competitors from each side for individual matches, plus a final tag team event. The winners will be declared the inaugural Interstellar Champions, with all the glory that entails." May pulled Dallas aside as Jameson began explaining the rules to the increasingly interested aliens. "What is he doing? This wasn't approved by the committee." Dallas shrugged, already caught up in the excitement. "Improvising. And honestly, it's brilliant. Look at the crowd. May, look at our visitors. They're engaged. They're curious. Isn't that what this fair is all about? But wrestling, it's so primal, raw, real." Dallas grinned. "Exactly what we need. Don't worry. No one's going to get hurt. It's all for show." May wasn't convinced, but she could see the enthusiasm building in both the human spectators and the alien visitors. Perhaps there was some merit to Jameson's impromptu plan after all. As the afternoon progressed, preparations for the evening's event accelerated. Jameson had recruited 3 former professional wrestlers who happened to be at the fair: Eleanor, the Valkyrie Voss, Bill, the Bulldozer Mitchell, and Dwayne, the Mountain Jackson, to represent humanity. The aliens, after some deliberation, nominated Krill, Puff, and Ron to represent their respective species. Behind the temporary lodgings, set up for the competitors, an unusual scene unfolded. The human wrestlers were huddled with Jameson, who was distributing what appeared to be ordinary wristbands. "Put these on before the match," he instructed in a hushed tone. "Don't take them off, no matter what happens in the ring." Bill examined his wristbands skeptically. "What are they? Some kind of good luck charm?" Jameson's smile had an edge to it now. "Something like that. Just trust me. They'll help level the playing field." Meanwhile, in the alien encampment, a different kind of preparation was taking place. The three competitors were being fitted with what appeared to be ceremonial armor, lightweight, ornamental pieces that represented their cultures. "Is this truly necessary?" Krill asked, as an attendant attached a shimmering breastplate to his exoskeleton. "It is tradition," Ron explained, already wearing what looked like a stylized version of ancient Roman gladiator armor, adapted to his metallic physiology. In combat sports across the galaxy, competitors wear ceremonial garb to honor their heritage. Puff bounced excitedly as a flowing, fur-lined cape was draped over his spherical form. "It feels appropriate for such a theatrical event. The humans seem to value spectacle in their competitions." May, who had been observing the preparations from a distance, approached Dallas with renewed concern. "Something's off about all this. Jameson's up to something." Dallas, caught up in directing the lighting crew setting up flame torches around the arena for atmospheric effect, barely glanced her way. "Jameson's always up to something. That's what makes him entertaining." "That's what makes him dangerous," May countered. "I'm going to keep an eye on him." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fairgrounds, crowds gathered around the arena. Torches were lit, bathing the wooden structure in a primal, flickering glow that transported everyone back to a time when such spectacles were the height of entertainment. The bleachers filled quickly, humans, and a smattering of other alien visitors who had come to observe the cultural exchange. Jameson Blackwell, now dressed in full medieval herald attire, complete with a feathered cap and flowing cape, strode to the center of the ring. A hush fell over the crowd as he raised a hand. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations," he bellowed, his voice carrying to the farthest seats. "Welcome to the first ever Interstellar Smackdown. Tonight, we witness history as Earth's champions face off against the finest warriors from across the stars." The crowd roared its approval, the excitement palpable. Jameson basked in it for a moment before continuing. "Our rules are simple. No modern technology, no weapons, no lethal moves. Victory comes by pinfall, submission, or ring out. Each competitor will represent not just themselves, but their entire species in this grand demonstration of athletic prowess." More cheers erupted as Jameson gestured dramatically toward the entrance. "For our first match, representing humanity, weighing in at 250 pounds of pure earthly muscle, Bill the Bulldozer Mitchell." Bill emerged from behind a curtain, his massive frame illuminated by the torchlight. He wore traditional wrestling attire, tight shorts, boots, and the wristband Jameson had given him earlier. He raised his arms to acknowledge the cheering crowd, his expression a practiced mask of confidence. "And his opponent," Jameson continued, "representing the noble Krill civilization, the mathematical marvel, the calculating combatant, Krill." The alien emerged to a mixture of cheers and curious murmurs. His iridescent exoskeleton caught the firelight, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the arena. The ceremonial breastplate he wore seemed to enhance rather than constrain his natural armor, giving him a dignified, almost regal appearance. As the two competitors faced each other in the center of the ring, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Human muscle and bone against alien carapace and mathematical precision. "Begin!" Jameson called, quickly exiting the ring. For a moment, neither moved, each studying the other with careful consideration. Then, Bill charged, a classic bull rush that had earned him his nickname, Krill, with a grace that seemed impossible for his lanky form. Sidestepped at the last possible second, one of his forearms lightly touching Bill's back as he passed. Not striking, merely calculating velocity, mass, and trajectory. The crowd gasped as Bill nearly crashed into the ropes before catching himself and turning. Krill stood calmly in the center of the ring, his multifaceted eyes processing data at incredible speed. "Your attack pattern is predictable," Krill observed, his voice carrying a hint of what might have been amusement. "The angle of your approach, the tension in your shoulders, all telegraphed your intent 2.7 seconds before you moved." Bill scowled. "Let's see you predict this!" He lunged again, but this time feinted left before attempting to grapple from the right. Krill, seemingly prepared for this variation, shifted his weight and used one of his lower arms to deflect Bill's grasp. However, as their bodies made contact, something unexpected happened. The wristband on Bill's arm glowed faintly, and Krill's movement suddenly seemed less fluid, more constrained. In the audience, May leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Dallas. Before he could respond, the match escalated. Bill, seizing the momentary advantage, managed to wrap his arms around Krill's midsection. With a grunt, he lifted the alien off the ground, a feat that should have been more difficult given Krill's size. Krill's exoskeleton shimmered in what appeared to be surprise. He attempted to use his multiple limbs to break free, but his movements were increasingly sluggish. Bill, with a triumphant roar, executed a perfect suplex, slamming Krill onto the mat with controlled force. The crowd erupted in cheers. Bill quickly moved to pin his opponent, but Krill, despite his apparent disadvantage, managed to roll away at the last second. As he rose to his feet, there was a visible dent in his ceremonial breastplate, directly over what appeared to be a junction point in his exoskeleton. "Fascinating," Krill said, his voice betraying no distress. "Your species compensates for its limitations with remarkable technique." The match continued, a dance of strategy and strength. Bill relied on power moves and wrestling fundamentals, while Krill employed his natural agility and mathematical precision to anticipate and counter. Yet, each time the wristband glowed, Krill seemed to lose a fraction of his advantage. Finally, after a particularly intense exchange, Bill managed to execute a powerful body slam that landed directly on the already dented portion of Krill's armor. There was a distinct crack, and Krill's exoskeleton beneath the ceremonial plate showed a hairline fracture. Jameson, who had been watching from ringside with intense focus, quickly called for the bell. "Victory to Earth's champion," he announced, as Bill raised his arms in triumph. The crowd cheered, though there was an undercurrent of confusion. The match had ended rather abruptly, and Krill, despite the apparent damage, seemed capable of continuing. As medical attendants helped Krill from the ring, May made her way to Jameson's side. "What just happened?" she demanded in a low voice. "That wristband, it's not just decoration, is it?" Jameson's smile never faltered. "All part of the show, my dear. All part of the show." Before May could press further, Jameson was back in the center of the ring, announcing the next match. "For our second contest, representing humanity, the warrior woman, the valiant vixen, Eleanor the Valkyrie Voss." Eleanor strode into the ring with confidence, her blonde hair braided in a complex pattern that evoked her namesake. Like Bill, she wore traditional wrestling attire and the mysterious wristband. "And her opponent," Jameson continued, "the bouncing battler, the spherical sensation, Puff." Puff rolled into the ring, his fur a vibrant mix of excited orange and determined blue. His ceremonial cape fluttered behind him, attached to what appeared to be a specialized harness designed to fit his unique physiology. As the match began, It quickly became apparent that this would be a very different contest than the first. Puff's natural buoyancy made him an elusive target, bouncing and rolling around the ring with surprising speed. Eleanor, a technical wrestler known for her precision strikes, found herself swinging at air more often than not. "Stand still, you fuzzy beach ball," she growled after a particularly frustrating miss. Puff's fur rippled with amusement. That would defeat the purpose of competitive movement, would it not? The crowd laughed, enjoying the spectacle. Puff was clearly a natural entertainer, playing to the audience with each dramatic dodge and theatrical bounce. However, the pattern from the first match soon repeated itself. When Eleanor's wristband made contact with Puff during a glancing blow, it glowed subtly, and Puff's bounces became less pronounced, his movements more predictable. Eleanor seized the opportunity, finally managing to wrap her arms around the alien's spherical form. With a grunt of effort, she executed a perfect suplex, driving Puff into the mat. The impact caused a visible compression in his ceremonial harness, right at the point where it connected to what appeared to be a natural indentation in his fur. Perhaps a vulnerability in his otherwise resilient physiology. Like Krill before him, Puff managed to recover and continue the match. But each subsequent contact with Eleanor's wristband seemed to diminish his natural advantages. Finally, after a spectacular flying elbow drop that landed directly on the already damaged portion of his harness, Puff's fur turned a surprised shade of white, and he let out a melodic sound that might have been pain. Once again, Jameson quickly ended the match, declaring Eleanor the victor. As attendants helped Puff from the ring, his fur had settled into a thoughtful shade of blue-gray. May, now thoroughly suspicious, tried to intercept one of the human wrestlers as they left the ring, but Dallas caught her arm. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Those wristbands are doing something to neutralize the alien's natural abilities," May insisted. "And Jameson is targeting specific weak points in their physiology. This isn't fair competition. It's a setup." Dallas frowned, glancing toward the ring where Jameson was already announcing the third match. "Are you sure? Maybe our visitors just aren't as adapted to wrestling as they thought. 3 different species, all showing the same pattern of weakness when exposed to those wristbands? That's not coincidence. Dallas, that's engineering." Before Dallas could respond, Jameson's voice boomed across the arena. "For our third individual match, representing humanity, the mountain of muscle, the colossus of the canvas, Dwayne the Mountain Jackson." Dwayne entered the ring to thunderous applause, his massive frame dwarfing even Bill's impressive physique. His dark skin gleamed with oil in the torchlight, muscles rippling with each movement. Like his teammates, he wore the mysterious wristband. "And his opponent," Jameson continued, "the metallic marvel, the philosophical fighter, Ron." Ron strode into the ring with dignity, his gladiator-inspired armor catching the firelight and reflecting it across his already metallic skin. Of the 3 alien competitors, he appeared the most humanoid in basic structure, though his proportions were slightly exaggerated, and his movements had a fluid quality that suggested a different internal composition than human bone and muscle. As the match began, it became immediately apparent that this would be the most evenly matched contest yet. Ron's strength seemed comparable to Dwayne's, and his fighting style incorporated elements that resembled Earth's martial arts: calculated strikes, leverage-based throws, and defensive maneuvers that spoke of a warrior culture with deep traditions. The crowd was enthralled as the 2 powerhouses exchanged moves, neither gaining a clear advantage. Ron would execute a perfect throw, only for Dwayne to counter with a wrestling move that sent the alien flying across the ring. Dwayne would attempt a submission hold, only for Ron to display flexibility that defied his metallic appearance and escape with elegant precision. However, the pattern established in the previous matches eventually emerged here as well. When Dwayne's wristband made prolonged contact with Ron during a grapple, It glowed more intensely than it had for the other wrestlers. Ron's movements became momentarily rigid, as though his metallic physiology was being affected at a fundamental level. Taking advantage of this momentary weakness, Dwayne executed a powerful slam that drove Ron into the mat with impressive force. The impact created a visible dent in Ron's ceremonial armor, directly over what appeared to be a junction point in his metallic skin, a seam or connection that might represent a structural vulnerability. Unlike his predecessors, Ron adapted quickly, seemingly analyzing the effect of the wristband and adjusting his strategy to minimize contact. The match continued with increasing intensity, the crowd on their feet as the two competitors pushed the boundaries of their respective physiologies. Finally, after a particularly spectacular exchange, Dwayne managed to maneuver Ron into position for his signature move, a devastating power slam that targeted the already damaged portion of Ron's armor. The impact resonated through the arena, and for a moment, Ron's metallic skin actually rippled, as though momentarily destabilized. Jameson, with perfect theatrical timing, called for the bell just as Dwayne pinned Ron's shoulders to the mat. "Another victory for Earth's champion," he announced to the roaring crowd. As Ron was helped from the ring, his dignity intact despite the defeat, May pushed her way through the crowd toward Jameson. This time, Dallas followed, his own suspicions finally aroused. "Enough games! Jameson," May demanded, her voice low but intense. "What are those wristbands? What is this really about?" Jameson's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "It's about entertainment, May, about giving the people, human and alien alike, a show they'll remember." "By rigging the matches?" Dallas asked, disappointment evident in his tone. "By exploiting weaknesses in our visitors' physiology?" "By creating a narrative," Jameson corrected. "By building to a climax that will leave everyone satisfied. Isn't that what all good entertainment does?" Before either could respond, Jameson was back in the ring, commanding attention with his theatrical presence. "And now, ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, we come to our main event, a tag team extravaganza that will determine once and for all which species truly deserves the title of interstellar champion." The crowd's excitement had only grown with each match, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Jameson raised his arms dramatically, milking the moment. Representing humanity, the undefeated trio of Earth's finest, Bill the Bulldozer Mitchell, Eleanor the Valkyrie Voss, and Dwayne the Mountain Jackson. The three wrestlers entered the ring together, wristbands gleaming in the torchlight, acknowledging the cheers with practiced showmanship. "And representing our esteemed visitors," Jameson continued, "the calculating Krill, the bouncing Puff, and the metallic Ron." The aliens entered to a mixture of cheers and supportive calls from the audience. Despite their defeats in the individual matches, they had won over the crowd with their unique abilities and sporting attitudes. All three still wore their ceremonial armor, though the damaged sections had been hastily repaired during the break. As the competitors faced off in the center of the ring, May turned to Dallas with determination in her eyes. "This isn't right. We need to stop this before someone gets seriously hurt." Dallas nodded, finally convinced. "I'll try to get to the officials, see if we can pause the event." But before either could move, a new figure vaulted into the ring, a slender woman with striking features and an athlete's build. She wore simple black training clothes and carried herself with unmistakable confidence. "Dan Dazzle," Jameson announced, momentarily thrown off his script but recovering quickly. "The former acrobatic champion. What brings you to our humble arena?" Dan, short for Danielle, though she never used her full name professionally, fixed Jameson with a steely gaze. "Cut the act, Jameson. I've been watching from the audience. Those wristbands are targeting specific weak points in the alien's physiology, points that were deliberately exposed by their ceremonial armor." A murmur ran through the crowd. The alien competitors exchanged glances, their body language suggesting this was news to them as well. Jameson's smile never wavered. Quite an accusation from someone who hasn't been invited to participate. Perhaps you'd like to put your theories to the test. Join the human team, if you're so concerned about fair play. It was a challenge, plain and simple, and Dan recognized it as such. She glanced at the three wrestlers, then at the alien trio, considering. "Fine," she said finally, "but I'm not wearing one of those wristbands." Jameson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "As you wish. The match will proceed as planned. A tag team contest. Last team with a member standing wins the championship." As Dan conferred briefly with the other human wrestlers, May managed to make her way to ringside. "This is getting out of hand," she called to Dallas, who had positioned himself near one of the officials. "I know," he replied, "but I think Dan might be onto something. Let's see how this plays out." The match began with Ron and Dwayne in the ring, picking up where their individual contest had left off. The two powerhouses exchanged blows and grapples, neither gaining a decisive advantage. When Dwayne's wristband made contact with Ron's repaired armor, the now familiar glow appeared. But Ron seemed better prepared this time, quickly breaking contact before the effect could fully manifest. The tag format added a new dimension to the competition, with competitors frequently switching out to maintain energy and leverage different skills against their opponents. The aliens, despite their earlier defeats, displayed remarkable adaptability, adjusting their strategies based on what they had learned in the individual matches. Dan, when finally tagged in, brought a completely different style to the ring, a fluid, acrobatic approach that relied on speed and precision, rather than brute force. She faced off against Puff, whose bouncing mobility made him a natural counterpart to her athletic style. As the match progressed, the pattern of the wristbands targeting specific vulnerabilities became increasingly obvious to the observant members of the audience. Each time, one of the human wrestlers made prolonged contact with their alien opponents, the wristbands would glow, and a weakness would be exploited. Dan, however, relied purely on skill and athletic ability. When she managed to execute a perfect flying kick that sent Puff rolling across the ring, it was through timing and precision, not technological assistance. The tide began to turn when Dan tagged in Bill, then whispered something in his ear. Bill nodded, a look of realization crossing his features. When he entered the ring to face Krill, he deliberately avoided using his wristband, instead relying on traditional wrestling moves that targeted general vulnerabilities rather than specific weak points. Jameson, observing from ringside, frowned slightly as he realized what was happening. He caught Eleanor's eye as she waited for her tag, making a subtle gesture toward his own wrist. She nodded in understanding. When Eleanor entered the ring against Ron, she immediately attempted to grapple in a way that would bring her wristband into direct contact with the vulnerable seam in his metallic skin. Ron, however, had been observing carefully and managed to evade the most direct attempts. The match continued to escalate, with momentum shifting back and forth between the teams. The crowd was fully invested now, cheering both sides equally, appreciating the display of skill and determination from all competitors. Finally, after a particularly intense sequence, only Dan and Krill remained active in the ring. The others, having been eliminated through various wrestling conventions, pinned, submitted, or thrown from the ring entirely. Dan circled Krill cautiously, respecting the alien's mathematical precision and analytical abilities. Krill's exoskeleton shimmered in the torchlight, the repaired section of his ceremonial armor clearly visible. "You understand what's happening, don't you?" Dan asked, her voice low enough that only Krill could hear. "The wristbands emit a frequency that temporarily disrupts our natural abilities," Krill replied, matching her tone. "And our ceremonial armor was designed to expose specific vulnerabilities in our physiologies. A setup from the beginning, Dan confirmed. But now it's just you and me. No technological advantages, no rigged equipment, just skill against skill. Krill's multifaceted eyes seemed to gleam with what might have been appreciation. Then, let us provide a worthy conclusion to this spectacle. What followed was a display of athletic prowess that transcended species. Dan's acrobatic abilities allowed her to evade Krill's calculating strikes, while Krill's mathematical precision let him anticipate and counter many of Dan's attacks. They moved around the ring in a dance of strategy and skill, neither gaining a decisive advantage. From ringside, Jameson watched with increasing frustration. This was not how the script was supposed to play out. The human champion was meant to triumph decisively, establishing Earth's dominance, even against technologically superior visitors. The narrative was unraveling. In the audience, May and Dallas watched with growing appreciation for the true competition that had emerged from the manipulated spectacle. "This is what it should have been from the start," May said. "A genuine exchange of skills, a respectful demonstration of different approaches to physical contest." Dallas nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Jameson won't let it end this way. He's got too much invested in his narrative." As if on cue, Jameson suddenly climbed onto the ring apron, distracting the referee. In the moment of confusion, Eleanor, who had been eliminated but remained at ringside, slipped her wristband to Dan, mouthing something that looked suspiciously like, "Use it." Dan caught the wristband reflexively, but made no move to put it on. Instead, she glanced at Krill, then at the crowd, clearly making a decision. Jameson, seeing his plan potentially salvaged, nodded encouragingly to Dan, pointing emphatically at the wristband, then at Krill's vulnerable spot. Instead, Dan executed a spectacular sequence of moves. First, a feint that drew Krill forward, then a leap that carried her over the alien's head. As she landed behind him, she slipped the wristband onto one of Krill's lower arms. Krill, understanding immediately, turned to face Eleanor, who had begun to climb into the ring despite having been eliminated. The wristband on Krill's arm glowed brightly as it came near her, revealing that the human wrestlers had been wearing similar technology beneath their ceremonial armor, hidden vulnerabilities of their own. Eleanor froze, caught in her own trap. Krill, with mathematical precision, simply touched the wristband to a spot on her shoulder. Eleanor's body went momentarily rigid, and she collapsed to the mat, eliminated once again. The crowd erupted in cheers at this unexpected turn. Jameson, his carefully constructed narrative now completely derailed, stormed into the ring, pointing accusingly at Dan. "This isn't how it's supposed to end," he shouted, forgetting in his anger that his microphone was still active. "The humans are supposed to win. That's the story." Dan smiled, unperturbed. "Maybe it's time for a new story." Before Jameson could respond, a new commotion drew everyone's attention. Ron and Puff had re-entered the ring, not to continue the match, but to confront Jameson directly. "You engineered this contest to exploit known weaknesses in our physiologies," Ron stated, his metallic voice resonating with controlled anger. "Weaknesses you learned about during the cultural exchange programs," Puff added, his fur a indignant red. "Information that was shared in the spirit of understanding, not to be used against us." Jameson backed away, his showman's confidence evaporating. "It was just entertainment," he protested. "A narrative that would satisfy the audience. The heroic humans triumphing against the odds. That's what people want to see." "Is it?" Dan challenged, gesturing toward the crowd. "Look at them, Jameson. Really look." The audience had indeed responded to the unfolding drama, but not in the way Jameson had anticipated. They weren't cheering for human dominance or alien defeat. They were invested in the genuine competition, the display of respect and skill across species. In that moment of realization, something unexpected happened. Dan, seizing the opportunity created by the distraction, executed a perfect acrobatic maneuver that positioned her behind Jameson. With precise timing, she delivered a theatrical elbow strike to the center of his back, not hard enough to cause injury, but perfectly placed to create maximum dramatic effect. Jameson, caught completely off guard, stumbled forward directly into Krill's path. The alien, with mathematical precision, simply shifted his position so that Jameson's momentum carried him into a controlled fall, a fall that ended with his face pressed against the mat. Dan's foot lightly placed on his back in the classic pinning position. The referee, after a moment of confusion, did what came naturally. He slapped the mat 3 times and called for the bell. The crowd exploded in cheers as Dan helped Jameson to his feet. Rather than showing anger, Jameson gradually broke into a reluctant smile, recognizing a superior performance when he saw one. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations," he announced, reclaiming his theatrical persona. "I give you your interstellar champions, Team Alien, victorious through superior strategy and unexpected alliance." The aliens looked momentarily confused, then understood the narrative that was being constructed around them. With a grace that transcended species, they accepted the declaration, raising their arms, or appendages, in victory as the crowd cheered. Later, as the torches burned low and the majority of the crowd had dispersed, the competitors, human and alien alike, gathered around one of the fairgrounds' fire pits. The atmosphere was relaxed now, the tensions of the ring replaced by the camaraderie that often follows intense competition. "I still can't believe you had this planned all along," May said to Jameson, who was nursing a cup of mulled cider. Jameson's smile was enigmatic. "Who says I did? Perhaps I merely recognized a better narrative when it presented itself." "The wristbands were real, though," Dallas pointed out. "The vulnerabilities in the ceremonial armor were deliberately exposed." "Of course," Jameson admitted. "Every good show needs proper setup. But the ending? That was improvised." Krill, who had been listening intently, tilted his head in what appeared to be amusement. "You created a scenario where either outcome would serve your purpose. If humans won, you demonstrated Earth's ingenuity, triumphing over advanced alien physiology. If we won, you showcased interspecies cooperation and respect." "A win-win," Jameson agreed, raising his cup in acknowledgement. "Except for the part where you exploited shared cultural information," May reminded him, her tone stern despite the relaxed setting. "An ethical lapse," Ron agreed, his metallic features catching the firelight. "Though one that led to an unexpected positive outcome." Puff, whose fur had settled into a contented blue, bounced gently in place. "The concept of kayfabe in your wrestling tradition is fascinating. The collective agreement to treat a predetermined performance as genuine competition." "It's not always predetermined," Dan corrected, stretching her arms above her head. "The best matches have elements of both, a framework within which genuine athletic skill is displayed." "Much like diplomatic relations," Krill observed. "Protocols and frameworks within which genuine exchange occurs." The group fell silent for a moment, contemplating the parallels. Around them, the Fair of Ages continued its night operations. Food stalls serving late dinners, musicians playing period instruments, craftspeople demonstrating ancient techniques by lamplight. "So what happens now?" Dallas asked finally. "Does the Interstellar Smackdown become an annual tradition?" Jameson's eyes lit up with a spark of inspiration. "Why limit ourselves to annual? Why not take the show on the road? An interplanetary tour, perhaps?" May rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of amusement in her expression. Always the impresario. "It has potential," Ron admitted. "A traveling exhibition that demonstrates both the unique qualities of each species and the universal principles of athletic competition. A cultural exchange through the medium of performance," Krill added, his exoskeleton shimmering with what might have been excitement. "Data suggests such spectacles often bridge understanding gaps more effectively than formal diplomatic initiatives. Puff's fur rippled with enthusiasm. And each world could add its own traditions and contest formats. On our planet, competitions often involve gravitational variations and three-dimensional arenas. As the discussion evolved into increasingly elaborate plans for an interstellar wrestling tour, May caught Dallas's eye across the fire pit. He smiled, shrugging slightly as if to say, "This is what happens when you bring different worlds together." May couldn't help but smile back. Despite the manipulation and the ethical concerns, something genuine had emerged from the evening's events, a connection that transcended the carefully constructed narratives and tapped into something more fundamental: the universal joy of competition, performance, and shared experience. In the flickering light of the dying fire, humans and aliens continued their animated discussion, already building new narratives together, stories that would bridge light years and connect civilizations through the simple, primal joy of testing strength against strength, skill against skill, and finding common ground in the process. And if those stories sometimes involved a human elbow strike defeating the galaxy's most advanced armor, well, that was just good theater, across any world, in any language, under any sun.